Hello biochemistry students. Now that we've learned a little bit about enzymes, we can take a look at the medical implications of some enzymes and their activity. The first one we're going to take a look at is the drug called lisinopril. Now lisinopril is a common blood pressure medication. If you talk to anybody who's over the age of 65, they probably know what this drug is. So here's how this works. In our body produces this long string of amino acids here called angiotensinogen. Now angiotensinogen gets converted from its inactive form to its active form by an enzyme called an ACE. It's an angiotensin conversion enzyme, ACE. And what it does is it cleaves off these last two amino acids. So these two amino acids get cut off by ACE, this angiotensin conversion enzymes, like this, just removes that. And then what is left over here is called angiotensin. Angiotensin. Angiotensin is a vasoconstrictor, so it narrows the blood vessels and increases blood pressure. So if you want to decrease blood pressure, what you need to do is interfere with the body's ability to convert angiotensinogen into angiotensin. And so by inhibiting this enzyme, you can do that. So there's a class of drugs that does this. They're called ACE inhibitors. ACE inhibitors, and these drugs inhibit this enzyme. And the most common one is called lisinopril. And lisinopril is, I guess the brand name of that is called Zestril, and it's a very common blood pressure reducing medication, an ACE inhibitor. Antibiotics are molecules that help to kill or prevent the growth of bacteria. Now there's an interesting connection between antibiotics and enzyme activity. You see, it turns out that folic acid is a B vitamin that humans get from eating food. Now bacteria are like, oh, we're way too smart for that. We'll make it all by ourselves, thank you very much. And this is where human ingenuity steps in. You see, bacteria synthesize their own folic acid. And what they do is they take something called PABA, which is p-aminobenzoic acid. Now let me draw the structure here for you. Looks like this. So here we have our benzene ring like this, NH2, and then our benzoic acid portion over here. Carbon like this, like that. Okay, so this is P for para, like on other sides of the benzoic acid here, or excuse me, the benzene ring. Amino, benzoic, benzoic acid, okay, are otherwise known as PABA, P-A-B-A for short, p-aminobenzoic acid. All right, so bacteria will convert this into folic acid. And humans, we don't do that. We have to get it through our food. But somebody very smart figured out that there's a molecule that looks very similar to this. And it looks like this. So here's our benzene ring, like that. And then sulfur, like this. NH2, and then NH2, okay? So, sulfanilamide. Now this molecule here looks remarkably similar somewhat to this one here. And so what happens is this molecule has to go to an enzyme in a bacteria. So here's my enzyme that looks remarkably like a kidney bean. And this molecule has to go to the active site on the bacteria, has to go to the active site here, the enzyme, to get converted into folic acid. And what happens is this sulfanilamide can, because it's the same shape, it competitively inhibits. In other words, it sits here on the active site of the enzyme and prevents the bacteria from converting PABA into folic acid. And so this is how sulfa antibiotics work, is they competitively inhibit the active site of the enzyme that converts PABA into folic acid. Another class of antibiotics works on a different enzyme. So bacteria need to make cell walls, and that's different than human cells. So cell walls have rigid structure that help to protect the bacteria, and if it can't form those cell walls, then it's becomes susceptible to osmotic pressure and breakage. Okay, and that's something we as humans, being multicellular organisms, we don't worry so much about, but it's a big deal for bacteria. And so if the bacteria can't produce those cell walls, they're at risk of dying. Now they have an enzyme that helps them do this. This enzyme is a transpeptidase. And what that does is it helps the bacteria to take the amino acid side chains and cross-link them together to make strong cell walls. Okay, and so what this class of antibiotic does is it inhibits that enzyme. And so this structure right here is called a beta-lactam ring. And it's not anything you need to memorize. Okay, I'm not going to ask you to draw this on a test or anything, but this structure right here, if R here is something specific, so if that R looks like this, if it is a CH2 and then attached here to a benzene ring like this, okay, a benzene ring like this, then this right here is called, wait for it, penicillin. There's penicillin. And so if this right here takes the place of where that R is, this is penicillin. And then let me show you another one here. If it looks like this, very similar, benzene ring here again, and then we have a CH2 and then an NH2 like this. Okay, if this here was attached where that R is, then this would be ampicillin. And okay, ampicillin. And then one here that you might be familiar with is if we have that benzene ring again, running out of space here. I'm going to put my benzene ring here like this, and put an OH there, and then a CH, and then an NH2 like that. Notice how similar this is, right? I mean, this is very similar to this, which is very similar to that. This one is amoxicillin. Amoxicillin. Now, don't worry about the names or the structures. The point of all of this is all of these structures are fairly similar, and they are competitive inhibitors of an enzyme that helps bacteria to grow cell walls. And so that's how these work to kill bacteria. And one last curious connection between enzymes and health is something called the grapefruit effect. And this is kind of a weird phenomenon that happens, that when people drink too much grapefruit juice, it can affect their medications, which is kind of a weird idea. And so it works like this. Your liver metabolizes a lot of the drugs that you might consume. and breaks them down, and so that way you can excrete them. And the way this works is there's like a series of enzymes called the cytochrome P450 system. And so it's called the CYP450, cytochrome P450. And think of it kind of like you have a bathtub like this, and in the bathtub you have a drain. And that drain is enzymes here called the cytochrome P450. So I'm just going to call this CYP450, okay? And it's just enzymes that help to empty the drain. That is to say, they take drugs or molecules floating around in your bloodstream and they help to eliminate them. So you excrete them like through your urine, all right? Now, if something were to plug up this drain or plug up this enzyme, competitively inhibit this enzyme, well, then the tub doesn't drain. And there's a molecule in grapefruit that does this. That molecule in grapefruit competitively inhibits the cytochrome P450 enzymatic pathway and prevents certain molecules from being metabolized. And those molecules are fairly common things like blood pressure medications and antifungal agents and anti-cholesterol agents. So many of these drugs then will build up in your bloodstream and can actually reach toxic levels. And so now the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, requires that new drugs be tested to see whether or not grapefruit juice will affect whether or not, or how fast they get metabolized. That's kind of weird. Now, typically, if you drink a normal amount of grapefruit juice, this isn't a problem. But there are people that have decreased liver function, and because of that, it becomes an issue. Or if you drink a lot of grapefruit juice, or if you're on a lot of these medications, it can become an issue. So it's just one more curious medical implication of enzymes.